It's the most complex of any murder case in our experience here.
Present time, we're working on quite a few things, leads which have not been covered previously.
For once, the international crime syndicate gains control in one area of criminal endeavor, and the well-known pattern of violence and corruption follows.
The local news archives are great places to find stories that don't get a lot of attention. The Lynn and Lewis Wolfson II Florida Moving Image Archives at Miami-Dade College contains hundreds of those stories. While going through the catalog for the WTVJ newsfilm collection, we came across listings for a crime that happened in August 1952, when a Miami housewife named Dora Pinder was murdered in her home. As we dug further into our catalog, our news scripts, and newspaper accounts, the story of the murder became more intriguing, involving burglary, illegal gambling, police infighting, and a menagerie of characters that seemed to defy reality. The amount of WTVJ newsfilm footage covering the story spans several years. Turns out, Dora's murder was not a random killing. It was just one incident in her husband Howard's criminal world, in which she, too, was an active participant. Howard managed to stay on law enforcement's radar for many years after his wife's murder. By piecing together this original WTVJ newsfilm footage, news scripts, and newspaper coverage, we retell the story of the Dora Pinder murder. Howard Pinder was notorious in Miami for operating the highly lucrative and illegal lottery-style gambling game known as bolita. It was well known that he always had bags of cash somewhere, whether in his car or at home. He also owned a fish market located at 1701 Northwest 6th Avenue, and possibly used the market as a front to launder the proceeds from his gambling venture.
Bolita means a game of balls, but it has been replaced in popularity by Cuba, a game in which wagering is based on the Cuban National Lottery. Bets are taken Friday night and Saturday. Collectors make the rounds of stores and homes where tickets are sold and deliver them to a central counting house. Recently, operators have developed a system of delivering the tickets and money on separate days. This makes it difficult to establish that a lottery is actually in progress. It also protects the operator from having his week's earnings confiscated in a single raid. According to the laws of probability, the odds are 100 to 1 against picking a winning two-digit number. Cuba and bolita operators pay 70 to 1, thus giving the house an automatic profit of 30%. Players prefer the game of Cuba because it theoretically cannot be rigged. The classic method is to either heat or freeze the number with the lowest play. When the bag is passed, the operator can easily pick out the right number and thus improve his margin of profit. The ritual of tossing bolita in a counting house has become too risky in recent years. The numbers are now dropped to a man on a prearranged street corner. The paper bag passes through the hands of a group of trusted players until the winning ball is pulled. The easiest way to fix a bolita game, of course, is to make the winning number the one with the lowest play. Long-time numbers players know this. But bolita runs twice daily, while Cuba is played only once a week. As a result, bolita remains in business, although Cuba obviously is the most popular. For example, when police raided a counting house operated by Cuban numbers writer Howard Pinder, they confiscated almost $30,000, a single Saturday's play. Pinder was convicted of tax evasion and sent to federal prison for 5 years, a rare victory for the law.
On August 7, 1952, assailants decided it was a good day to rob the Pinder home of what was reported to be between $76,000 and $100,000 in cash, all while Howard's wife Dora was there bedridden and in ill health due to her bad heart condition. According to newspaper and WTVJ reports, Dora's doctor, M.F. Weiner, who arrived on the scene before the police, determined Dora's cause of death was coronary thrombosis due to her heart condition. It was only because of Eagle-Eyed City, Miami police detective B.F. Palmer, who thought it unusual for there to be powder burns around Dora's mouth and so much blood on the floor if her death was really due to a heart attack. Family members of Dora arrived on scene and proceeded to give Detective Palmer a hard time about his insistence on more investigation. He called Police Chief Walter Headley, who said, "Keep investigating." Further examination did show Dora had a bullet hole in her mouth and a bullet hole in her brain. Later, an empty shell casing from a .32 caliber Beretta pistol was found on the floor of the house. This prompted Miami Police Department to investigate this as a homicide, which now made Dr. Weiner a suspect, if only for a moment.
Isn't the fact, Doctor, that you concluded in the presence of police officers and Detective Palmer, homicide, that Dora Pinder died of coronary thrombosis?
No, sir. That is a point I want to make very clear. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity. At no time, despite all exception on that point to the contrary, did I ever state that she had died of coronary thrombosis.
The doctor said he didn't notice Dora had been shot in the mouth. He also said he didn't know any of the other suspects and claimed police were trying to frame him for her murder. Later, the doctor said he was sure Dora died of a natural spontaneous hemorrhage and not a heart attack as originally reported. Howard offered a $5,000 reward for information on Dora's murder in order to expedite the investigation. He was miffed about the amount of attention Miami police was giving to investigating his bolita racket, rather than focusing on finding who murdered his wife. Why was Dora killed? One theory was that she had loaned a large sum of money to an acquaintance without Howard's knowledge, which meant she had tapped into the cash held at the Pinder home, and then was unable to pay out on a bolita win, and thus murdered because of that. This theory didn't take off. Chief Headley's resistance to any assistance offered by other law enforcement agencies and experts resulted in public outcry that not enough was being done to find who had killed Dora, given her execution-style murder.
This case is going to take people in possession of vital information, or people who might be in possession of vital information, are certainly scared up and clam up, so to speak, when they get all this attention by people like that. We're going to continue every way that we can, and if it's possible at all, this case is going to be cleared, regardless of where the chips may fall.
The police investigation focused more attention on bolita gambling that resulted in some action by the grand jury and Dade County Commission, which is not what the racketeers wanted.
The newspapers in recent days have been full of accounts of the vicious numbers racket, and properly it should be. This, however, is not a new indication of gambling in the Miami area. It's been with us for many, many years. It's been with us to the knowledge of the police and the policing agencies. The bolita racket, which is the form of racket, the numbers racket here in the Miami area, has been operating wide open. I say this with a great deal of consideration. I know that it's being operated wide open. And I know that the police and the policing agencies know that it's being operated wide open.
And Howard Pinder definitely didn't need any more heat on him when he was already in tax trouble with the feds, dating back to the late 1940s. Over the course of several weeks, tips and clues came into the police department, with none panning out. The Miami Herald continued to report on the investigation when a photo of a description of a model of .32 caliber Italian Beretta pistol used in the killing was published. FBI agent Edward L. Dubois connected that same weapon to an investigation of stolen automobiles based on information from informants and other sources. Then, Detective Clarence Hall was able to trace the pistol to the Burdine store in downtown Miami. In January 1953, James Lewis became the prime suspect after the Beretta was traced back to him. He had denied he ever owned the gun, but handwriting analysis on the bill of sale proved otherwise. Lewis also said it was a man named Gordon Clough who shot Dora with the gun, which apparently Lewis had given him. Lewis was very convincing in his accusation. His status shifted to witness, but he was then investigated by the feds for the interstate shipment of a stolen car. Lewis made bail and ran to New York. Unfortunately for him, someone in Miami tipped off the authorities and Lewis was arrested at the airport as he departed the plane in New York. with a loaded pistol in his bag. Clough was also arrested in New York after Lewis had said he was involved, but Clough denied knowing Dora and claimed to be innocent. Clough had been living in New York for a while, but he was sent back to Miami to face the charges. He debunked some of Lewis's story, and he offered to take a lie detector test. Clough's wife Elaine said she knew he had a gun, and she was with Clough and Lewis on the afternoon of the murder, and knew that the men went to pick up money from a woman. She said she didn't know any more than that. The questioning of Lewis by the sheriff and police was recounted in the Miami Herald on May 11, 1953. Lewis said his intention was to rob Dora, and that it was a woman whose name he couldn't recall that had assisted him. Gordon Clough ended up getting indicted for first-degree murder after Lewis blamed him for Dora's murder, but that charge was later withdrawn. Lewis later remembered the woman's name and claimed Edna Mae Young was at the shooting too. Edna said she fled the moment Lewis took the gun out. Young was accused of posing as a saleswoman to gain access to the Pinder home. She said a man named Harry S. Kane and Lewis threatened her if she went to the police. Charges of being an accomplice against Young were later dropped because Lewis refused to testify. Harry Kane was also named an accomplice by Lewis. He was also Lewis's former father-in-law when Lewis was married to his daughter. Kane did admit to being in the neighborhood with the others, but he denied participating in the robbery plot. Lewis said it was Kane who went with him to the MacArthur Causeway, and it was Kane who threw the murder weapon into the bay. Kane denied any knowledge of the shooting. Another accomplice named by Lewis was Henry Luber, who said he was with Lewis on the day of the murder but did not participate. Luber said he had drove everyone to the Pinder home, but he claimed he didn't know a crime was being committed as he waited in the car. Luber was initially charged with first-degree murder and then a reduced charge of accessory. He was sentenced to August 1956 to 1 year in prison. The final accomplice that Lewis threw under the bus was Rudy Crowder, who was an associate of Harry Kane. Crowder was tasked with the disposing of Lewis's car, but Lewis claimed Crowder was the planner of the robbery and was in the car at the Pinder house. A cash gang member, John Fulford, claimed he was offered $3,500 by Crowder to murder Dora. But this didn't seem to have any traction. The cash gang was yet another crime group based in Miami.
This is a statement received from John Fulford, is that correct?
That's right.
I wonder if you would outline for us in brief what Fulford had to say.
John Fulford testified before the state's attorney in the presence of his attorney. George Kosmak is representing Mr. Lewis and the defendant, Mr. Lewis, together with some Jack Fulmwater and Fred Jones, investigator of this office. And on August the 7th, in the morning, he was called to Mr. Rudy Crowder's garage and was asked by Mr. Rudy Crowder if he wanted to do a job for him. That job consisted of murdering Dora Pinder at 5 o'clock that afternoon. Rudy Crowder showed him a gun that was taken out of the glove compartment of his Cadillac car, wrapped up in a grease rag. That gun was a .32 automatic of a foreign make. Fulford told him no, that he was not interested in that job. He didn't do that kind of work.
Lewis confessed to accidentally killing Dora, but later claimed that the confession was coerced out of him by Detective Hall. He said he only wanted to take the $76,000 in cash that was supposedly in the home, and not to kill anyone.
Sure. And upon, after beating, they procured a confession from him with the distinct understanding that he would allow the acceptance and there would be a plea of manslaughter. Now, this is not in the case that he's charged with. We would like to know what assurance we have that that manslaughter plea is going to be accepted, and if not, no assurance, we wish to stand on our constitutional rights here as a defendant in a case charged with murder in the first degree. And we ask and we state that we will not answer any questions until we have that assurance.
Eventually, after a drawn-out investigation, Lewis was indicted and then sentenced to life in prison. Throughout this murder investigation, City of Miami Police and Dade Sheriff's Office butted heads over different aspects of their separate investigations. Sheriff Kelly rushed to release information on Lewis's confession before the City of Miami Police could do so. Names of suspects were released before they could be apprehended, thus giving the suspects, specifically Luber and Crowder, a chance to escape. Chief Headley asked State Attorney Brannigan to get involved as a more neutral party, but then acting Governor Charlie Johns decided to put I. Ray Mills in charge of the investigation. Mills was closely affiliated with the Dade Sheriff's Office. Lewis said it was Mills with Dayton Blackford who coerced a confession from him by getting him liquored up and threatening him as they drove him from Dade County Jail to Rayford's Florida State Prison, all without his attorney present and in violation of his civil rights. Going back to the reward Howard offered, Miami Police Detective Hall and now former FBI agent Edward L. Dubois both claimed they should get the reward. Hall even filed suit in 1954 to claim the reward money. Dubois was savvier in his approach. He resigned as FBI agent, became a lawyer, and then made a claim for the reward money in December 1955. He was awarded the funds in 1956. Howard told the Miami Herald that he planned on living a quiet life on a ranch near Okeechobee with his 500 herd of cattle. He said he had cut himself off from gambling and intended to stay on the straight and narrow for his 5 kids. In November 1958, Howard was back in the gambling biz. Howard was busted at a North Dade County house along with several of his family members, which was only a few months after he had served 9 months on another lottery conviction. By the early 1960s, Pinder's bolita operation was taken over by a mobster named Santo, as in Santo Trifacante, the infamous Florida mafia kingpin.